Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Next up is a presentation by Christina Poppy, our Director of English Language Arts for Camp. Her presentation focuses around some changes in the federal government and the requirements with regards to students completing their FAFSA form. And I'll let her finish that stuff on the entire presentation. So, Christina Poppy.
Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good, how are you? It's wonderful to see everybody this evening. I am here to speak with you on sort of the forefront of a bit of a change to the landscape of our senior year experience in 2016-2017. And part of this does have to do with what Mr. Middleman mentioned, the change in the FAFSA opening for filing for federal financial student aid. In the past, that deadline, or that opening date, I should say, was January 1st. Next year, the opening is going to happen on October 1st. Our guidance department at the high school has kind of foreseen this changing that landscape of our seniors' experience, particularly in their English classrooms. And the way that that's sort of connected is through their encouragement of current juniors, our incoming senior class, to complete their college applications for that October 1st deadline. At this point in time, it's strictly encouragement, but in terms of what happens in our English classrooms at the start of student senior year, that certainly presents a significant change. Our current practice, our past practice, as I mentioned in this slide, during marking period 1, students enter into their English 12, English 12H classes by being reintroduced to personal narrative writing. It's writing about themselves, something that they probably haven't done in a formal sense since they were in middle school. When students enter 9th grade, they move into 10th grade, they're preparing for their Regents exam in 11th grade. Suddenly they find themselves consistently writing about texts, and that kind of corroborates what Dr. Losing was saying about the research program. During those initial stages, students are learning to examine texts very closely and draw their own conclusions. And so we move away from the self, the me, the I in writing, and we focus students' attention on what can this text tell me? What inferences can I make? What conclusions can I draw about the information that's before me? And how do I articulate that in writing? That forms the basis of students' writing experiences in high school, grades 9 through 11. What the college essay requires is a complete reversal, and we pull kids back into themselves. And what that essay is doing is serving as sort of a way to make their resumes come to life for a college admissions council. So essentially, students are selecting a poignant moment in their lives, a significant event, their perspective on a particular issue, and expressing it, including the my and the me and the my. And excluding, well, the text says, and this quote says, and that person said. That reversal of thought takes some time. It's not undoing what we've done in high school, but it's sort of contributing to reverting students back inside their own heads. And our teachers take our students through all of the stages of the writing process. So they start in immersion, and they start looking at mentor texts in terms of saying, this is what students produce. This is a great example of a college essay. This is a solid example of a student expressing who they are for a committee of strangers to gain entrance into a particular institution. They go through the additional stages of the writing process, ending in revision, editing, and finally publishing. And typically, that process lasts anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. So we're talking a majority of the first month in period. With the changes to that sort of external opening, I don't want to say deadline, it's an external opening of the FAFSA financial aid offerings. that puts a significant time crunch on a process that really needs its due process. So for example, next year we're looking at an opening of school during September 7th. And for that October 1st opening of the opportunities to submit their applications, we're truncating that process to 3 weeks. Our goal is to have students in a position, I'm moving backwards now. Our goal is to have students in a position where they're able to receive as much teacher support as they possibly can during those 3 weeks, and be in a position, be poised to submit their entire application, including that FAFSA document, on October 1st. The English teachers at the high school, I witnessed it this year, are incredibly giving of all of their free time during that first marking period. As those 10 weeks rev up, I find them meeting with students, conferencing with students in hallways on their hall duty periods, during their free periods, after school. They're squeezing in appointments with students to, again, give that writing its due process whenever they can. And those essays may not take the form of a single document. Most college applications these days require an extended response beyond that blanket essay. So even with the extension into those sort of nooks and crannies of their schedule, we're looking at that time crunch. And believe me, the teachers really want to support their students. We're not also only talking about 12th grade teachers. Students go back to the teachers with whom they're most familiar, with whom they spent plenty of time as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. That's a natural extension. So they bring back these personal extensions to people with whom they're comfortable, and they're seeking advice and feedback. So it's a department-wide effort at this point.
Is it starting in the middle school also? Is it happening in the middle school?
The writing process, I'm happy to say, and I'm able to say this at this point, for the last 2 years, we've been working with Sarah Cordova in the middle school, in both middle schools, at the middle school level. She is our literacy consultant. Next year, she'll be moving her efforts into 8th grade. And what she has emphasized with our teachers is the development of our own writing units of study that emphasize the writing process, all of the stages of writing. Like I said before, from immersion through editing, revision, and publishing. She embraces that sort of extended process writing piece, which again is what's being sort of re-energized here in 12th grade. And so we're having that progression of that type of curricular shift into 8th grade next year. Also building in the pieces of writing style that students need to produce on a daily basis in all of their subject areas, including English, those prompt pieces. Write for 40 minutes, show me what you know. Give me a quick write based upon your understanding of what you just read. Draw some inferences and put it down on paper. So it's about a combination, and that's the work that she's been doing in both of our middle schools. Combining the process piece, so the broader understanding of how to compose and what the steps are, and how they're ingrained into a process of what it means to be an author and a writer. And I can say that I have been in 6th and 7th grade classrooms all year long, and students are owning that identity as authors. And that's really the most beautiful thing that you could ask for. So as students move into 8th grade, they're going to continue to hold on to that identity. I'm a writer. I can do this because I know the steps that are involved. And I know that it takes time, and I know it's a lot of work, but I can do this. That confidence is the beginning.
Well, if that's happening, that's a big plus for Connect-One. And any district, because that's always been a topic of discussion. How to make our kids writers.
In truth, learning that process, I think, has lifted the level of instruction for the teachers as well. So many of them have reported to me as a result of their work with Sarah, I have never touched writing this way. And so it's been transformative in many different scenarios. She has been into every 6th grade classroom within the district this year, supporting the work that the teachers wrote, and that's the biggest piece. It comes from within. It comes based upon what our students' needs are, what the trends are, how they've sort of recognized things over the years. So it's an awesome, awesome sort of transformation that's happening. To get back into the high school, to come back into, you know, what's on the forefront of next year. And I should say that that process and that exposure and those pieces of planning are happening. We're articulating into 9th grade as well next year to kind of sort of bridge that gap between OBMS and RMS and CHS, so that we're able to see, you know, what do kids need as 9th graders? How does their writing look? How does it feel? What do you expect? What do you need for students to be able to do at the end of their freshman year, the end of their sophomore year, the end of their junior year in preparation for that Regents exam? And so this is a little bit different because the Regents exam requires self-to-text writing. It's about the informational pieces, and it's about the argumentative pieces. It's not about me. So again, in preparation for that, and in preparation for the truncation of the time period, when students will be able to meet with their teachers, chat with their teachers, really, you know, have a firm grasp on, you know, I have a strong document that I could submit on October 1 if I choose to for my college application. We're proposing a 12th grade summer college essay workshop. Shooting for the stars here, we're proposing a 5 days worth of sessions, 3 hours per session, where students will receive targeted instruction. What does it mean to go through the steps of the writing process? What should a college essay look like? These are all things that happen during marking period 1. But again, the focus has to shift. The shift has to happen in order for students to be ready for October 1. So in September, our vision for 12th grade teachers, when I sat down and I spoke with them, they said, well, we'll really be able to focus on revision and editing and the publication of a final piece of work. We can't become immersed in the other steps and expect that we're going to have something super solid at the end. And so we're proposing that that piece of it take place during this workshop.
You mean incoming 12th grade students, right?
These are incoming 12th grade
Right,
students.
so they're 11th grade.
Current juniors. So in their junior conferences with their guidance counselors, students have been made aware of this sort of change that's happening according to dates. And they've also been made aware that it would probably be in their best interest to at least have a draft, to walk in as seniors with something in hand that they could present to their teacher. They're issued by their guidance counselors the questions for writing for the common application, the prompts for writing for the common application. So at least they have a basis, something to write about. They're walking out with that in hand as juniors. The 11th grade teachers, you know, recognize that part of this could seem as if it's really incumbent upon them to start the process in their 11th grade classrooms. The rub is that our Regents exam has shifted from January to June. And as you probably know, this year is the first iteration for our junior class of the Common Core Regents exam. That exam that requires just our argumentative writing styles and our information, our analysis writing styles. It's not about me. So those teachers have expressed sincere concern that if they were to introduce the narrative pieces, it would be confusing to students. And when they sit down to write that exam, they're going to experience that sort of internal confusion as they craft something that is, you know, very definitive.
So is this ongoing? Will this always be ongoing?
That's a great question. And that's something that we've sort of bantered about. Ideally, it would be enculturated. Like you are walking into your 12th grade classroom with a draft in hand. But what happens over the summer? When do those drafts actually happen? That's a tough scenario to face, right? Because we can't guarantee or we can't support every student in their homes to say, you know, oh, Johnny and Mary and Susie are definitely going to come into class on the first day of school ready with something in hand. Sometimes there needs to be more clarification. Sometimes we have students who aren't confident writers, and so a draft to them may look nothing more than a list of bullet points.
So the kids that are currently in 11th grade,
Yes.
at the end of this school session, would it be wise to say to them, do your draft, because we're going to have classes, say, potentially in August, so that at least they come in with you
That's the
with
hope.
something and not just nothing. And the AP students, would they be instructed as well too? Because I know they're not, they're different.
This would be open to every incoming 12th grade student, regardless of their leveling. And we know that most of the time our AP students are a little more motivated, so they may be those students who are walking in the door to a session like this, or on September 7th to their AP English teacher saying, I finished something over the summer, can you have a look? I've already published it. Can you just let me know what you think? I've already had 10 people read this. I think I'm ready. So you have all those varying levels, but this would not be exclusive of any student in terms of what those levels are. The instructional piece is always good to hear, and check. Does my be reflective? Does my piece meet those requirements? Is that really what a college essay should be, what I produced?
Now, I read the scholarship essays, are they similar to the college essays?
Yes.
So what I found in the last couple of years of reading the scholarships is that some children just have a flair for writing, and it's like you opening it up and you're reading a book about their life, and it's so engaging, and you're like, it's like a page turner, but unfortunately it's only a page and a half or two. But then you have other children that they do share some stories that are a little bit tragic in their life. But they don't, I'm not saying they should tell it like a story, but they're not using the right words to tell their story. It's like, my grandma got sick. They're not using, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right.
It's not as engaging perhaps as it could
Absolutely
be.
not as engaging. So they may have a great story to tell, but they're focusing on their sad story as being the be-all of their story, and I'm finding that it shouldn't be the be-all of their story. It should be them with their own creative words and their creative thoughts about themselves. And of course, introduce those things as well, but you find some children that don't have any travesties in life, and it's like, again, it's what the content, how they wrote it,
It's the packaging. Truly, when I was teaching, one of the best college essays that I ever read was about a student's first time getting up on a surfboard. That was it, that one tiny moment. And the way it was packaged and the way it was presented was so engaging. You wanted to read more. They gave you just enough. And truly, you could see them through their writing. And the writing was exemplary. And some students do have that now. Other students do need to work at it, and that's part of the work that's happening right now in the middle schools. And it's not a guarantee that every kid is going to be this incredible writer, this incredible author. But again, the end game is that they own it as authors. This is my authentic work.
was it like a gift? Sometimes I think it's just a gift.
In some instances, it is a gift. In other instances, if a student truly works at it and works at it and works at it, they're going to produce something that is all of the things that we mentioned. They may not be able to do that on the spot, though. In a 40-minute class period, write an essay for me. It's not going to look like that piece that they drafted, revised, published, drafted, revised. They went through those process steps with, over a time frame of 2 or 3 weeks for just those end steps of the writing process. So, there are differences there. But again, in some instances, yes, students do have that gift, but it does not mean and it does not exclude other students who may not be as gifted from producing something that's
Another thing that I
wonderfully
noticed
strong.
that I would like to see more of when I won't be reading the mention myself be a senior, but they're opening and closing. It's you can have a powerful opening, and that's what keeps you engaged. And I find that a lot of children don't have that powerful opening, that powerful closing. It's like something they can work on, because that's what helps you keep you. They're about over 500 scholarships, and
Right.
so they don't grab me by the first, third sentence. I'm like, oh, I
Right.
read it thoroughly. But
It's not there, that one little sort of twinge that makes you,
Yeah.
stay interested. That the focal points of their work can be whatever it is they need. And I have found in my experience that students sometimes start an essay thinking this is a great introductory paragraph. By the time they get to the conclusion, they've written something completely different from what they set out to do, and they haven't gone back and they haven't attended to that revision piece, and they haven't had somebody else take a look at it and get out of their own heads and step away from it. So that does happen. If a teacher were able to sit with them and conference with them and say, you know, look at what's happening here, or a peer was able to say, look at what's happening here, it doesn't connect, that could be part of the workshopping piece that would be encapsulated within that workshop. So it would be sort of the instructional portion and then an opportunity for teachers to get hands-on with students' work and to have those conferences that are so valuable. And those are the ones that we're talking about tucking into the corners of their day during the first marking period in the class.
One question, is this being promoted also with the guidance counselors and the 11th grade teachers?
I've spoken with the guidance department, and they brought the FAFSA piece to me. And they said, this is going to create an issue. It's going to have a ripple in your 12th grade English classrooms, and they're absolutely correct. I've spoken with the 12th grade English teachers. I've spoken with the department as a whole.
So prior to us rolling this out and really going through, looking for board support, and obviously from that we would work with the CTA to facilitate some sort of salary schedule.
Christina, how many kids do you think you'll serve in the 5 sessions? Will there be a cap to the amount of the maximum in each session?
That's a great question, and I think that students would have to, it would necessitate some registration on the student's part to see how many students we can anticipate, because certainly if the teacher were sitting in a room with 60 students, there's no way that they're going to be able to give that type of personal attention. So we require some registration aspects, and then we would have to negotiate it from there.
So can it ought to be sent out in mid-June?
It can.
Our first goal is to obviously communicate to kids, convince kids that this is really important.
Right.
The next piece is,
As most parents, this is not even an option.
well,
It's really, when you really think about it, it's not an option. They don't have January anymore.
But-
It's October.
but
They don't have market
the
period one.
communication
Yeah.
piece is probably the most critical,
Right.
and I won't say anything else.
No, that's okay.
Ideally, how many kids are you looking to, I have 2 questions.
It's
One,
500 kids.
is it one session for each kid, or is the kid attending all 5 sessions? Are there 5 separate sessions for different children?
Our mental model, and it could be variable, but our mental model was some instructional pieces at the beginning, so it would be a similar session every time, and a workshopping portion. So it would have to be highly structured. The teachers would have to write the curricula for those pieces.
So if I'm a student, I'm going to attend all 5 days?
Well,
Or
maybe
attend-
you would attend one day, maybe you would attend 2 days to continue with the support. Maybe you would have some recommendations to go home and make some revisions, and you would attend the second day to go ahead and say, okay, this is what I did, where am I now? Maybe you would register for all 5 days because your schedule would allow that, and you would sit and absorb and take on some of those ancillary writing pieces that you have to complete for your additional college application.
So ideally, what do you see as a student-teacher ratio?
It's a great question. I would say a regular classroom size would probably be the maximum that we want to see, 1 to 20, 1 to 23, something of that nature. This way, the instructional portion can happen. Look, there's going to have to be a component of that day where a teacher has the students being self-directed and self-guided, and that goes into the curriculum writing piece, because there's no way that one person can be there for, all 20, let's say, for instance, students in a classroom setting. So that would, occur through some really careful writing and some creative writing on the part of the teachers who would, be working within this workshop.
So then, in other words, the kids have to make a commitment. So if I find out, July 30th, there's a workshop, maybe I'll go to it. You've had to already been committed to it.
The commitment is important. The commitment is important. And so the communication has to happen beforehand. And absolutely, the 11th grade English classes could be a wonderful springboard to start that communication piece. A formal letter, we talked about having notifications on the high school's webpage and on the English department's webpage. And we also talked about potentially having a robocall sort of reminder go out once we hit that
I was just
registration
thinking,
period.
this is Sydney, because I know they, you know.
That would be wonderful as well. That's a great idea.
I think it should be stressed the importance of parents taking advantage of this, because again, we lose that time.
That's one of the most beautiful things about, the beginning of senior year for students in 12R, especially in 12H classes. Students finish that first marking period and they have something that's ready to be submitted. They have a document that they can proudly submit as a representation of who they are. And that happens in class. With that, and I have to mention these final little pieces here, the English teachers, brought to my attention, well, we're focusing then on the first 3 weeks of the school year, the first 4 weeks of the school year, on those stages of the writing process. So now we're working with approximately 6 weeks to the end of the first marking period, and those are not necessarily uncharted waters, but our curricula in 12 honors and 12 regions has to change. It's a forced change because of that time frame. So we're proposing a revision, an allowance for the revision of existing curricula for the 12R and for the 12 honors courses as a result of that change in curriculum as well, as sort of a residual effect. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Are you also, as part of the English curriculum, teaching them how to take the college verbal interview?
Right now, I have 12th grade teachers who are conducting interviews in class. And this is more of a career focus. So it's, as it is during the second semester at this point of a student's senior year. But they are focusing on those practical skills, including the interview pieces for career positions, for college applications, for college campus jobs that may crop up in the next couple of years. They're focusing on study skills, how to work within study groups effectively, how to manage their time. They're incorporating very proudly those pieces of the equation into their regular instruction in order to prepare students to not only write appropriately for their post-high school experience, but also present themselves in a manner that is both professional and indicative of their training here in their post-high school experiences.
That may be the make or break.
It certainly may be the make or break contingency piece there.
Thank you.
Thank you.